to our last session of the semester. Tuesday discussion of the summer semester 2023. Last time we're repeating the spiel, Christoph and I. So my name is Gesa Lüdecke. I'm the Director of Graduate Programs here at the Technical Center. And together with Professor Christoph Mauch, I am moderating the Tuesday discussion this semester. And I have to say, I've been looking forward to this session today since April, because I always wanted to invite Professor Monika Egerer to the Tuesday discussion, and now it worked out for our last session, which is wonderful. And before we get started with listening to a short input about her work and then a Q&A and discussion, I would just give a brief overview and introduction to Monika Egerer. She is a professor of urban productive ecosystems at the Technical University here in Munich. I think she's actually the youngest professor I've ever met. I think so, at least personally. And she has a very impressive CV. When I read it, I was really impressed where you lived. So you lived in the US, where you're originally from. You lived in Thailand, in Australia, and I had to look it up where it actually is. Northern Mariana Islands, is that right? Is that called Mariana Islands? Mm-hmm. I didn't even know that those islands belong to the US. And you lived in East Germany, also in West Germany. Who knows where you will be living next? And you research at the Technical University how biodiversity can actually be brought into our cities, or especially into Munich as a city, through, for example, orchard meadows, that's Streuobstwiesen in German, or climate resilient green in general, and other urban productive ecosystems. And the term urban productive ecosystem is something that I think we will hear more often today, or more about today, because it's actually something that you research on, and there's an entire website presence on this UPE, urban productive ecosystem research that you're doing. And Monika is also doing a lot of citizen science research, what I find personally very interesting. There is this project called Stadtoasen. I don't know if anyone of you has heard of it before. I think you initiated it during COVID. Was it 2020 or 2021?
2022, actually.
2022.
So it's just about a year old.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I remember I participated as a citizen, so you can go on the website and then you click on the interactive map of Munich and can zoom in, and then you can enter your favorite space in Munich, which is something where you like to linger, where you like to meet friends, where you like to have lunch. Unfortunately, my place is going to disappear this year because they're going to demolish the building and the entire area, so I have to look for a new place. But I would actually be interested in hearing what other places, what people choose as their favorite places, if it's always connected with green, or if it's architecture, or it like buildings inside. So maybe you can tell us a bit about that later on. You have, as I already said, very impressive CV. You received many remarkable grants for your research from the Postcode Lottery, from the Heidehof Stiftung, from the DFG, from various Bavarian ministries, and you won the Enlightened Leadership for Sustainability and Environmental Activism Scholarship from Kalamazoo College, which is the college where you did your BA your BSc in biology. Yeah, biology was. You did your master's and PhD in environmental studies later on. And you also won the Scholar Athletes Award for being a really good tennis player. Is that true? Long time ago. And you won the Environmental Education 30 Under 30 Award from the North American Association for Environmental Education, just to name a few. So I think we have a little idea of what you're all doing. We have some students who work with you from the Technical University, so I had a little... I heard a bit about what you're doing, and this was really exciting, so this is the reason why I wanted to bring it to our Tuesday discussion, and especially because you're bringing together the research on ecological spaces in the urban context, but also the social benefits that those spaces create. So thank you so much for coming to our last Tuesday discussion, and everyone please join me in welcoming Professor Monika Egerer.
Yes, thank you for the invitation to speak to you all today, and for the very warm too detailed introduction. Now you know a little bit more about me. So I'm originally from the US. I have German relatives. Actually, my dad is from Germany and immigrated when he was in his 20s, and that's why I have a very German name. And people are very confused when I speak German because I have a very strong American accent. But yeah, I've been at the TUM for 3 years now and have various projects in urban green spaces in Munich, as well as in Berlin and in Bavaria-wide. So today I just want to present one, because I know I don't have too much time. I only have like 15 minutes is what I've been told. So we'll see how fast I go. I want to present one project that was just discussed, our Stadtoasen, or Urban Oases project in Munich. And here we are trying to understand the value from an ecological perspective, meteorological perspective, and social perspective of urban green spaces in Munich. And I'll talk about this at the end too, of why this is really important, is that we see that our favorite green spaces in our cities can actually be lost. And whether that's for development or other recreational purposes, it's important to place a value on green spaces so that we can communicate that to the policymakers or the planners that make decisions about how our green spaces are managed or maintained. So what motivates me and our research group at the TUM, so the Urban Productive Ecosystems group, is some of these big global challenges facing our world. And maybe this is why you are also working at the Rachel Carson Center or studying here. This includes land use change due to urbanization or agricultural intensification that in turn drives climate change and massive biodiversity loss. And among some of these really big challenges, and also that urban populations are rapidly growing, is urban ecosystems. They're becoming increasingly important for a multitude of functions and ecosystem services, or these benefits that we derive from ecosystem properties and processes. So whether it's tree-lined streetscapes or city parks or urban community gardens, so all of these visual images here, these are all examples of urban ecosystems and what we call urban green infrastructure. And so whether it's for shade and biodiversity, like this giant old tree here, or relaxation and recreation, like these folks doing Tai Chi in a park in Taipei, or nature connection. So many of the first experiences with nature that kids may have today is in urban green spaces and urban parks. So these are all reasons for the growing importance of urban ecosystems. And so given all these important aspects of urban ecosystems, our group is really motivated to investigate what drives potential functions and benefits of urban ecosystems and how we may, through evidence, improve them. So we use inter and transdisciplinary research to understand ecological and social patterns and processes in urban ecosystems, to develop evidence-based and practice-oriented recommendations to support biodiversity, ecosystem services, and human well-being, and to guide the role of people as ecosystem managers to promote biodiversity and ecosystem services and well-being. And so generally in our research to answer these questions, we study how ecosystems are managed, how urban landscapes are managed, and how social aspects of people associated with ecosystem and landscapes affect different aspects of biodiversity, different ecosystem functions and services, and dimensions of human well-being. So this is a nice illustration that a postdoc in our group, Julia Schmuck, has illustrated to demonstrate how we are thinking about these pathways. And so the laboratory in which we conduct our investigations include urban community gardens like Essbarer Stadt here in Munich, as well as in Berlin, in urban parks. And recently we're also looking at sustainable urban drainage systems that are also really important for managing stormwater in cities. And so we use field observations where we go out in green spaces and look for bugs or document what plants are growing in these spaces. We also use experiments here, like the strawberry plants that are growing in the greenhouse, to look at pollination services, or the soil samples in the laboratory, like here. And we also use citizen science. So here this photo is showing an urban gardener who is measuring the development of her tomato plant. And we look at the pollination of these plants in relation to the bees that we observe in these gardens. And so while many of the systems in which we work are rather small, so maybe just 400 square meters or 100 square meters in size, we are working under the hypothesis that despite being small, These systems can have a powerful impact when they're scaled up across the landscape. So, for example, gardens may be stepping stones for insects, while small parks around the corner can be valued meeting places for neighborhood residents. And so today, I just want to present research on one system in which we work, and this is the Stadtoasen, or the Urban Parks project, and present how we are conducting ecological and social research in urban parks in Munich. And I'm doing this because it's also a ploy to get you to fill out your Stadtoase in Munich as well, to contribute to our research. So here we are looking at these Stadtoasen or urban oases in Munich. And we're asking 4 research questions. So what are the health benefits of urban green spaces? How does green space size, vegetation composition, and structure affect the meteorological factors of green spaces? How does green space size, vegetation composition, and structure and meteorological aspects affect the health benefits of green spaces? And what do people in Munich or Munich residents want from these oases, and how should oases be developed in the future? And so to answer these questions, we blend methods from social and natural sciences like we see here. So we use terrestrial laser scanning. I'll show you some photos of that to look at the structural complexity of these sites. We conduct microclimatic observations as well as just basic flora inventories of these sites. And then we're also using survey questionnaires, citizen science, and developing living lab elements to add this participatory and transdisciplinary aspect to our work. So for this project, we are specifically interested in this small but powerful hypothesis. And so we wanted to look at sites that vary in size. And so we have a focus on small parks, but also looking at mid-sized parks and large parks. And so we have these sites across the Mittleren Ring of Munich as our study system. And what we do in each of these parks is we set up 50 by 50 meter plots that vary in their vegetation to provide a nice structural complexity gradient. So thinking about, you look around you, the trees outside your window, they all vary in how they vary in their size, in their canopy cover, etc. And thus that may have important aspects on biodiversity or influences on biodiversity and also of the cooling benefits that such vegetation provides. So here I'm just showing these different bar graphs where each of these little bars represents one of these 50 by 50 meter plots, and we see that these plots vary in their canopy cover and how much free space is available, etc. And so at the ground level, so that was more the bird's eye level, at the ground level within these plots we use what we call a terrestrial laser scanner. So here's Sophie Arzberger. She's a PhD candidate or a doctoral student on this project, and she basically walks around with this handheld device and captures a 3D model of these plots. And so here in this 3D model we see that there's different sizes of the tree. So red being high high meters, and blue being low or just a few meters. And then we also go out and we look at the species richness, so that we identify the trees and the shrubs in these plots. And so we produce these different profiles for the different plots, like I've already shown, and we see this in the parks themselves. So whether it's Eschenanlage or Bavaria Park or Leopold Park, that we have within the small, medium, and large parks, we have a varied structural complexity of these different spaces. We also then set up temperature loggers in our sites, as well as in a reference point or in a gray built-up site to measure temperature and humidity. So here's Sophie again hanging up these temperature loggers. So maybe you'll also see these loggers as you're walking by some of our parks, and also maybe on a street side nearby. Please don't vandalize them. But you'll see that this is for continuous measurements of temperature over the entire year. And we also have a reference point in a forest, the Ebersberger forest in the outskirts of Munich. And so we have, this is just 5 months of data collection. So we looked at the winter months as soon as we'd set it up. So this is just a plot over time looking at how green spaces are different from these reference spaces. And so we see that our green spaces in general, they may vary in how warm or cold they are in comparison to these references across the day. So usually we see that at noon we have warmer temperatures. And our next question is how this relates to the green space characteristics as well, so the size as well as the vegetation structure. And so we're just now working on this analysis since we are just have collected one basically season of data. And so here across the city, we see these differences and, for example, the average daily maximum temperatures. And we already see that, our inner city plots are pretty warm compared to maybe some of those at the outskirts near the Isar. And we'll now look at how the metrics that we derive from these point clouds or these 3D models then relate to these temperature measures. And to measure health and well-being indicators that are associated with the green spaces, we have a questionnaire with standard question sets to ask people what motivated their visit, their connection to nature and also within that space, their mood and how restored they feel after visiting the space. And so this past summer, Vera Knill, she was a master's student in our project. She went out and conducted the pilot survey that we've now implemented last month in all of our sites. And so she set up these posters. I'm like thinking of the German word as soon as I see the German advertisement, as well as went out and talked to people. So here she was really interested in looking at how, we have one large park, we have one small to mid-sized park, and then we have kind of a very künstliche, artificial place that is pretty small. And what she found already is that we see that the well-being indicators differ between urban gray and green spaces. So we see what she found that in some, for example, Pasinger Stadtpark, that the mood, life satisfaction, and restorative capacity were higher in this space than in this in Pasinger Marine plots, or this relatively artificial gray space. And also that perceived naturalness positively associates with restoration capacity. So if people are perceiving a space as more natural, they're getting more well-being benefits or feeling more restored. And so I think what this says is that container trees, like we see here on Pasinger Marine plots, are maybe like a fast food of urban greening, right? So you can do it like a quick green. We set up these Kugelbäume, these trees and plots. And of course, this offers shade for people passing by. So this is something that we often heard in our interviews, is that I'm just stopping here to escape the sun for a minute as I'm walking from shop to shop. So these little places are also important for offering these stepping stones of cool or shade, especially when it's warm out. But they probably don't have the same positive restorative effect on people as walking through a large park. And so it's, of course, important to add green in the landscape, but it's also more important, I would say, to preserve these large green spaces that we have in our cities, because we know also from a lot of research in meteorology or in urban green infrastructure generally and urban ecology how important these large green spaces are for supporting biodiversity, especially mobile populations or animals like birds. But that, we need these also for the well-being benefits, and that spending more time in a larger park can have these important well-being benefits. And for citizen participation, we also have a website and survey to find locations of where people's oasis is in the city. So people can identify and locate their oases and what are the characteristics that make it such. So I actually wanted to grab pamphlets to pass out, but I just didn't have time today, you can scan or just type in stadtoase.de, and the website is here, and look at where you can click on this interactive map where your Stadtoase is, like here in English or Garten, for example, and describe what makes this your oasis in Munich, what do you like about this place here, specifically in regards to natural elements, and how do you feel here? And so it's really interesting. We have I think over 300 or 400 responses now, or maybe over 300 responses now, and we see that some of these are just very small flecks in the city landscape, or small like little dots of vegetation, like this one. This person mentioned here and said that this is quiet, free, happy, alone, but not lonely, as many people use this area differently. And others are like in this park as well, or this square, where people leave a little bit more of complex or deeper answers about what they like about that place in Götzingerplatz. So the trees in the large church make me feel well cared for. The square is not too big or too empty of plants that I feel observed, but also not too small that it constricts. And that, they don't feel overwhelmed and they feel reassured. And others just say simply the quote of this title of this slide, say Wohnzimmer im Freien. So these are just some examples of the data that illustrate that people have very basic associations with green spaces. So it's my living room, my outdoor living room, especially if you're living in a small apartment in the city. And some have very deep and connected areas, or deep and connected thoughts and feelings and values around these places. So this is all ongoing work, and maybe the next time that I am invited here, or someone from our team is invited here, we can present more information, especially around the social-ecological, and thinking more about these interactions between temperature and thermal comfort and restoration capacity and the complexity of these green spaces. And just I will leave, I guess, with a couple of notes about how I think we are starting to draw this picture about how these urban oases, even if they're just small and tiny dots from a bird's eye perspective, and tiny dots of green in the landscape, can be really important for supporting health and well-being benefits, and for us to learn about what is the value of green spaces in our cities. And particularly maybe in times of hardship. So we think about the pandemic, or thinking about increasing heat events when being inside may be unbearable for some folks that are especially vulnerable. And so the question is then, how do we move from gray to green? And this is, increasingly a topic I think, for the city of Munich. And I hope that our data, as we're drawing recommendations for city planning and policy, because we are funded by the ministry, that we can make recommendations for healthy and more livable environments in the city. And so this goes I'll just mention briefly that we've now started like a sister or a spin-off project of this project called City Soundscapes, where we're thinking about Klanglandschaften, or soundscapes, as an important link between an indicator of biodiversity. So thinking about birds or some insects or other animals that make sounds, or thinking about the wind in the trees or water flowing, and how that also has that is also an indicator of restoration, and how people may become more restored through multisensory experiences in urban green. And so maybe also the next time I can present more on that. And I already said this, but I think you can't say it enough. I think work like this and doing research in urban areas is kind of a pain. It's a lot of hassle to get Genehmigungen, or approvals to work in especially in public areas that are managed by the city, but also in private areas as well. But it's so important to put quantitative data behind the value of green spaces so that we don't lose them. And so this is, I think, every year in our urban garden research, for example, we lose one of our sites. And even though we know, and a lot of literature and research shows the value of these spaces, whether it's for biodiversity or social cohesion, etc., or food provision, unfortunately these spaces do lack policy protection and are not necessarily integrated into urban planning for now or for the future. So I hope that work like ours will provide some insight into why these are ecologically and socially valuable spaces in the city. And I'm happy to take questions. But first I will thank our Stadtoasen team. So this is us and or part of us on one of our first Stadtoasen visits, where we ride around on bikes and look at places and select sites for our plots. And then also the Urban Productive Ecosystems team, that part of them are a part of this project, but in some are an important driver of this work. So with that, I will thank you all and happy to have questions, discussion, etc. for the next half hour or so. And yeah, thank you again.